Welcome to the Princess and the Bee podcast, the place to be to build your empire as queen of your body, business, and life. I'm your host, Kimberly Spencer, founder of crownyourself.com, and I'm an award-winning coach, Amazon best-selling author, and multi-passionate entrepreneur. Each week, I give you the systems, strategies, and success stories to help you master your mindset, communicate with ease, and triple your productivity so you make the income and the impact you deserve. Imagine this podcast as your weekly spark of inspiration as you take it to the next level with all the bees of your life. Body, business, bank account, boys, and babies. Let's make it rain. Good morning, my fellow Princess and the Beers. Thank you so much for joining us today, whether you are listening to this in the morning while I am recording this, or you are joining us in the evening, or from whatever time. Thank you so much for joining and for giving your attention and your presence and your listening ears to this podcast. That means so much to me. I always like to start off. Well, let me backtrack that. I've only recently started off this podcast with a moment of gratitude, because even though I go into this podcast excited as F to do it and to record it, and seeing our numbers grow is so powerful to me. So if you find that this episode resonates, or any of our episodes, please share it with a friend who you think could benefit from this, because that is what this is all about, is us coming together as the kings and queens of this world, the leaders of this, of the consciousness revolution, to be able to come and share and create a community. And that is really so important for me. So I thank you for listening. I thank you for participating. I thank you for sharing. I thank you for engaging with me on social media. I am just so grateful for you. And I popped in the booth today because I just experienced a negative emotion. Yes, I was in the middle of my workout, and as many of us know, our unconscious mind runs our body. And we know that because we aren't consciously thinking about beating our heart or breathing. It just happens naturally. That's an unconscious process. So our unconscious mind runs the body. And a couple of the prime directives, I did an episode early on in this podcast on the prime directives of the unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind has two things related to the body. It has a blueprint for perfect health. It also represses negative emotions and negative memories that have too many negative emotions, that are like too much for you to handle where you are now. And it represses them for a time when you can handle them, a time when you can release them. Well, where do you think these unconscious memories and experiences, negative experiences, go to if you aren't yet able, like on just a physical level, to cope with the amount of emotions involved? Like I shared with my friends on the Hyperconscious podcast way back in February. And I will link to that interview because it really was a very, very powerful interview. And I shared with Alan and Kevin an experience that I had never spoken about in 6.5 years. And it was an experience where I was raped. And I never wanted to think of myself as a quote unquote rape victim. I really love the fact that I am in full ownership of my life, and I take ownership where necessary, and I'm very, very cautious around language and around especially something as extreme and as serious as what rape is. And I dove into this on their podcast, but when I looked up the actual definition of what rape is, which is sexual penetration without permission, I was like, well, yep, that's what happened. That's what happened. So yes. And what happened is I wasn't in a place 6.5 years ago to emotionally deal with that.
consciously deal with rape and with the shame and the guilt of putting myself in a position that somebody could take advantage of me. And I just, because I always wanted to be strong and independent and all that. And when I came up with that, when I had that breakthrough at HPA back in September and then shared about it with on the Hyperconscious podcast, I was like, it literally was liberating. It was like these emotions that had been trapped in my body, like my body felt freer. And that, to circle it back around, that is where our unconscious mind stores it. Our unconscious mind runs the body. And so there are many studies around, the causes, like how stress affects your body, how anger affects your body. Like people who tend to be quite angry have higher risk of heart disease and stroke. And people who are constantly stressed, well, what stress does to you is it literally, if you are operating on a consistent level with too much cortisol and in that fight or flight constant space on an energetic level, when you are operating from that space, your skin secretes a toxin on it so you don't taste good, because your body's preparing you to be like eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Like this is our 2 million year old brain saying like, okay, danger, Will Robinson, this is something that's very serious. So when you're operating from a place of constant stress or from like constant negative emotions, what happens is your body kind of takes it on. And there's a fantastic book on this that changed my husband's life. My husband, who lived with chronic back pain for 20 years. I was so grateful to both my coaches and one of my Pilates clients, Meredith Prunkard, who I interviewed on this very podcast. She talked about, because she was my transformation of like when I saw what negative emotions actually could do to a body on a physical level, because back then I was just training her in Pilates. And when I saw that, I was like, and then I saw the transformation of after she had healed these negative emotions, it literally healed her back. And it was basically like psychology for your body, in essence, because she was releasing the negative emotions. So there's a fantastic book by Dr. John Sarno called Healing Back Pain, which I highly recommend. A link to that will be in the show notes. Like I said, on this episode or another one, like book recommendations are my jam. So if you want more book recommendations, please DM me on Instagram at Crown Yourself Now. Let me know, because I am more than happy to deliver a plethora, like a literary avalanche of books to you. So back to the unconscious mind and experiencing negative emotions. So needless to say, in my journey into manifestation, law of attraction, shifting a mindset from scarcity to abundance, negative emotions, like everybody talks about like raising your vibe. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to raise my vibe. So I put this like shame and holy shit, I should not experience these negative emotions. If I do, oh my goodness, the all of my dreams and everything, it's going to get resistance and whatnot and all that stuff. And I started to experience like a lot of shame and guilt around, experiencing human emotions. And I would quickly try to handle them, quote unquote, as quickly as possible, because I couldn't feel that. I couldn't feel the negative emotions. I couldn't experience that, because that would prevent the manifestation of all my dreams. That would lower my vibe. So I have to stay high vibe. And do you notice my language around that? Have to stay, shouldn't, couldn't. All of these is language of being at effect. Language at being at the effect, swinging on the opposite side of the pendulum of being at cause and being of ownership. So and also language that removes you from being present in the now, actually in a state of gratitude and acceptance of what is. So those were all my beliefs around negative emotions that started to get churned up because I was diving more into spirituality. And as I went through, I was like, this isn't healthy. Like, this isn't something. I was having resistance against my own resistance against having negative emotions. Why? Because here is the thing. Feelings are 100% natural and human. And I have to give credit where credit is due. The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership rocked my frickin' world. Talk about a paradigm shift. Because in the past, I used to have, like I said, that fear of having any sort of negative feeling that would quote unquote lower my vibe. Excuse me. And I had that fear of experiencing that. And when I was reading the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership as recommended by the uber talented Tirza Shirai, who I interviewed on episode 30 of this podcast, who has scaled her company from in like a few short years to $30 million. I was like, I gotta take note of this girl. Like, I gotta, whatever she's doing, I want some of that. So I got the book and I just am like cheering, applauding. I actually got in contact with the Conscious Leadership team. Very excited about that. And I dove in, and there is a chapter on this book, in this book, about feeling all of your feelings. And I could have literally cried because finally that resistance that I had been feeling around not feeling my feelings, because now being in a much more heightened state of awareness, a much more acceptable place to deal with anything negative that's coming up. Anything that's negative. Like right now, currently my dad is in the hospital. And I, in the past, would have tried to repress all the fears, the worries, the sadness that I have around that. And instead, I decided to do an experiment. And I gotta say, for the past few weeks, that experiment has been a massive game changer. Because the experiment, as shown to me in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, the experiment was, okay, it says to feel a feeling, to feel all the feelings for a duration of 90 seconds. You see, because feelings are totally human. We have feelings of hunger and we satisfy them by feeding us. Feelings are just signals around something that we need to focus on, something that we need to heal or process or understand or just experience. Feelings are just a sign that there is something that we need to pay attention to. And the thing is if you think that you shouldn't feel, quote unquote, shouldn't feel any sort of like negative emotions, I'm sorry, you are human. Some feelings happen. They're as natural as feeling hungry and then satisfying that with food. So what is the food that we satisfy feeling a negative emotion? Well, feelings are oscillatory. Like we have emotion, we are all oscillatory beings. We all oscillate. We have a rhythm. We have a natural, we are up. Just think of our day. Like we are up several hours a day and then we sleep several hours a day. We have hours, like studies show in productivity, and this is one of a high performance tip, is that high performers understand that we have about 50 to 90 minutes of like solid focus work, and then our brains need a break. That's oscillating. That is just allowing for the ebb and the flow like an ocean. Well, feelings ebb and flow too. So when you think about a feeling, when the next time you experience a feeling, experience all of it. Like For example, from my workout. I was working out and I was specifically working my back and my shoulders, my lats and triceps. And if you think about in your body, there are certain places that your body stores negative emotions commonly, and more people are finding this to be true and accepting this. There is a great book called The Secret Language of Your Body that was recommended to me by my coach, and I got it, and since then it has been my go-to just guidebook as far as like, oh, I'm feeling this in my body. What could that mean? Oh, I'm feeling soreness in my throat, like when I had my laryngitis. What does that mean? And what does, and then dealing with it, because your body is giving you clues to how to heal and get back into a place of alignment, of feeling totally healthy and into alignment on an energetic level. So the feelings that you're experiencing, it depends on what they are, but they can get stuck in essence in certain places of the body. So that's partly what Dr. Sarno's book explains with his diagnosis of tension myositis syndrome, of that really being the cause of the back pain, which is repressed negative emotions. And he actually gets into the physical science of it, which is why I highly recommend the book, of like what happens in your body, how your body like shuts down, your body lacks blood flow and oxygenation to certain areas and that's partly what causes the pain, and it's because of these repressed negative emotions. So the upper back that I was working on, if you think about the upper back, what do you think about? You think about things like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. You feel like you have a burden. Like imagine having a really heavy backpack and you're like, it kind of makes you hunch over and like it's heavy and hard to carry. Like imagine the Atlas. Like, you know, the Atlas figure of the man, it's a beautiful sculpture, the man, and he has the whole world on his back. Well, I was working out my upper back and suddenly I had this surge of a feeling come up. And it was a feeling, and there were many things relating to it, and many images that came up. But immediately as I felt that feeling and I felt it come on, I put down my bungees on my Pilates machine, and I just sat with it, and I allowed myself to really feel it, and not really feel it like regurgitating, like, why is this coming up, and thinking about it, because that's like vomiting up just thought processes. And when the feeling gets stuck in thought, that's when you get into trouble and get into like it becoming a constant of like, why is this feeling coming up? Well, why is the feeling coming up? It's because it's a feeling and you're human, and it needs to come up. It's coming up because it needs to come up, and it also needs to release. But when it gets stuck in the process of thought, in thinking about it, or in judging the fact that it's there, like judging, oh, why am I feeling this? Oh, I shouldn't be feeling this, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that I fully admit and own that I was doing in the past, that is when it gets stuck into bringing down your vibe, should we say. So the feeling is meant to come up and surge, and it is also meant to release. Like I said, oscillation. So when you feel the feeling, imagine putting a sound and a movement. So all and breathing. Like this is, and sometimes I understand, like sometimes when you feel any sort of negative emotions, like fortunately Declan wasn't with me. Spike had Declan and they're still sleeping, and I was downstairs by myself, and I just breathed into it. So I started with breathing, and I just breathed into it. I started to feel it and allow it to surge and the tears to come and allow it to just release. and I breathed it, and I allowed for a sound and emotion. So I caught myself rocking, and I caught myself rocking it out of me, kind of like a wave, just kind of like a surfer on the surface of that wave, and allowing myself to feel that feeling, to oscillate with it, and to ride that wave into the shore, back into a place where I was back at gratitude, back at my normal state, back at my normal, mostly joyous state, I would say. But it's necessary to allow for that ebb and that flow, and to let your body give you those signals. So I always, whenever I feel any sort of pain or strain or anything in my body, I literally ask that body part, what's it doing? Like, what's up with this? Like, what's going on? And that allows you to dive into your own unconscious mind to see what is going on. Like, what is up with your body? Like, what is your body trying to tell you? Because pain is a way of your body, just like any negative emotion. Negative emotions feel painful. Like guilt and shame, there is weight to them. Anger and rage and sadness, like there is weight to them, and it is normal to feel them. And one of the studies that's referenced in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, it states that a feeling it's totally natural to experience it for 90 seconds. And this was not the first time I heard this. The first time I actually heard this was when I saw Tony Robbins live, and about 2 years ago, I saw Tony Robbins live in LA. It was amazing. And he said, he talked about choosing joy and releasing the struggle. And so feeling the feelings, when you're trying to resist against feeling the feelings, allow yourself for 90 seconds to really feel that feeling. To really feel it, like really go all in to feeling that feeling with a sound and a movement. You got to move it out of your body. So whether that is through exercise, like that's why I find running so healing for me, especially when I'm feeling angry or any sort of irritation. I breathe it and I run it out of my body, because you don't want that emotion, that feeling to get stuck inside. Because that's what happens is when you have feelings that are attached to a negative experience, and even if they're not attached to a negative experience, like I was having a great time working out and I just experienced this negative emotion of sadness and shame and guilt come up. It was mostly sadness. It was really mostly sadness, just deep sadness. But I felt this sadness come up and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to feel it. Rather than saying, oh, no, I'm just going to push through. I'm going to not feel it. I'm just like, I'm going to feel it. So whether I can feel this and continue to breathe and work it out of my body and move my body, and my body was not in a place where it wanted to sit. It wanted to rock. It wanted to just allow for that sound of the breath to release it. And as the tears came, as they do, then it released. And the same is true for anything of any emotion, any negative emotion that you feel. Allow for that release. So sometimes, and yes, I understand, sometimes you have to ask yourself, can I fully feel this feeling right now? Because if you're with your kids, or if you're with, if you're in a meeting and you're in negotiations and that other person is getting you pretty righteously pissed off, then sometimes it may not be appropriate. You may not be in a place to be able to fully experience and express that. And that's why I so admire the interview that I did with Lucy Lampy on this podcast. She spoke about how she had an experience with her daughter where she was getting very pissed off, and she couldn't allow herself to feel that feeling in that present moment because she had to deal with taking the kids to school and just get them moving. But once she dropped those children off, she fully admitted on the podcast to just screaming her head off, letting it out through sound and through motion and doing the release. And once she released it, she got back home and she was fine. But it is necessary to do the release. Allow yourself the 90 seconds. Allow yourself the 90 seconds. And if you catch it lasting longer than 90 seconds, check yourself if you're getting stuck in your head and in your thought processes and in judging the feeling for being there in the first place. The feeling, like I said, it's just like hunger. So when you judge it for being there, it's like judging yourself for being hungry. Like, why am I hungry? Well, you're hungry because you're hungry. Like, you're hungry because you're hungry. You're feeling it because you're feeling it. Like, accept it for what it is. Accept it that it just is a beautiful sign that you're human and you have a glorious rainbow of emotions that you are allowed. And after this podcast, I hope you give yourself the permission. In fact, I give you the permission, even if you don't, because it's necessary. I give you the permission to feel all of your feelings. Feel all of them. Feel the whole rainbow. Allow it to come out, not at anybody, but take the time to let it release. Give yourself the 90 seconds to allow it to surge inside your body like a wave and then release into the shore so that you can go back into the state that you are normally at. Because when you don't, when you repress it, it creates all sorts of health issues, tension issues, body aches and pains, and it removes you from the now. Because when you start putting thought judgment as to why you're experiencing it, that's putting you in the past. Instead of just accepting, in the now is where change happens. Transformation happens in the now, in the present moment. So in the now, you're experiencing it. And that's okay. That's totally okay. And so in the now is where you have the opportunity, the glorious opportunity to feel all of it and then let it go. Be like Elsa. Let it go, baby. I feel like bursting into song at this moment. I will spare you. And so let me know what you loved about this podcast episode. I would love to know. I hear my baby up. So I would love to know what you learned about this. Have you ever struggled with shame around feeling, human negative emotions like I did? Have you ever felt like you shouldn't or couldn't or really shouldn't, or you had to stay high vibe, and so you couldn't or shouldn't experience these human emotions? Let me know on Instagram. DM me at kimberly.spencer or at Crown Yourself Now. I answer both. My team does a lot more with Crown Yourself, but I answer the DMs personally from moi to you. So I am so grateful. Again, thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. And if you love this episode, and if you know somebody who is struggling with feeling all their feelings and experiencing the negative emotions, and then the key is releasing them. What is and real quick to circle back, just one last point. I was on a coaching call with Brendan Burchard, and who is my mentor, and he was discussing just this. And he said that if you feel a negative feeling for longer than 5 minutes, it then becomes a negative emotion, and that's when it gets stuck in your body. And that's when you're stuck in like the thought process and the judgment and all that for experiencing that. So I just want to let you know, like, We've got a powerhouse of people who are saying, feel your feelings, let them be experienced, and also let them be released. Don't get caught up in the mental regurgitation and in judging the feelings for being there. So if you know somebody who has been struggling with feeling their feelings, who is quote unquote trying to stay high vibe and really kind of bombing at it, then please share this episode with them. I have all the links to the books I recommended in the description. So go there, check it out, get the books for yourself. I know we have some avid readers because readers are leaders. And if you are listening to this podcast, then you are the leader, the queen or the king of your own life. And I am so grateful for listening, for you listening. And I look forward to next time. As always, your reign is now.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If what you heard resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and share your breakthroughs and ahas with me by leaving a review on iTunes so I can keep the magic flowing your way. And if you aren't already following us on social media, come experience the extra inspiration and queenly convos on Instagram at Crown Yourself Now, or visit our website at crownyourself.com. I am so excited to connect with you in the next episode. And in the meantime, go out there and create a body, business, and life that rules.